name is Garcia-Hernandez, and here is my graduate capstone oral presentation for EDU 510. So, first we have our teaching context. So, I teach on the west side of San Antonio here in Texas at Great Hearts Western Hills Public Charter Schools. I do teach 5th grade math and science here at Great Hearts Western Hills Public Charter Schools. One of the great things about this school that really helped in my experience is the fact that it is a classical education, which is different than a traditional education you would get at a public school or even the regular public charter school. Classical education, they don't really discuss pop culture, they don't discuss movies, music, anything of the such outside of literature or what we are actually learning in class. It's heavily focused on literature such as classics from first grade all the way through high school. That's what makes it different than a traditional school, where students typically speak about, different pop culture things. What's happening here is more focused on classical and just literature in general. So it has been different this year, but of course I do treat it as a positive experience. Now, I have been to many different campuses from different districts and types of schools. I would say here I've realized that parents are more heavily involved compared to anywhere else that I've been, which can be both a great and a negative thing at times. It's great because the students are getting that support at home that they need at times. I won't be able to help them with math or their science or whatever subjects they need help with, but the parents are really involved and they're able to help them get their assignments and things done at school. Also ask questions. They're always here on campus. They're very supportive, so they really do have a great support with the parents. And of course, it can go both ways at times, both positive and negative. But I do see it as a positive thing, and that is one of the great things about the Great Hearts community. Next, we'll go ahead and focus on my research question. So, my research question that I went ahead and was able to research over the last few weeks, few months, is how will implementing the Stroop task strategy or method daily help support my 5th grade scholars' anxiety when it comes to fractions or mathematics in general? So, my interest in this question came as I have personally dealt with this school year. As I said, I teach 5th grade math. I recall when we first started fractions, students were already freaking out, already scared. I don't know how to do this, I don't know how to do this. One of the main things I kept hearing. And it's before we even got to even do our first example, and that's just because they saw a fraction. They saw something different than what they were used to seeing. And another thing, we also had just went over decimals, so they also went from seeing decimals to fractions, which kind of still gave them that anxiety. It kind of freaked them out still a bit because it was something new, something we haven't actually went over yet this year. So, as I've noticed my students having anxiety and they expressed how concerned they were with these new math concepts, the fractions, this research question came to me as an idea to help me actually help my current students, and of course next year as I would continue to teach 5th grade math or any other grade level math or other subjects. This strategy would actually help us implement this and help all the grade levels throughout, beginning from 1st all the way up to 5th grade. Now, it's also because the issue of anxiety connected to math problems is something that not only scholars deal with here in my class, but In the 5th grade, we have 4 classrooms. It's dealt in all 4 classrooms. All classes have anxiety when it comes to specific math problems, specifically like fractions or decimals. So this strategy or this research will help me not only my class here in 5A, but 5B, 5C, as well as 5D. So then we'll be able to help the whole 5th grade, and then from there, we use what we implemented in 5th grade to 4th, to 3rd, and so on, to help the whole school, and then from possibly reach out to other campuses, other Great Heart communities, and spread our strategies and our results of the Stroop task. So this is an effective way we can actually check our data, which we'll go through in a bit, and see if the data aligns with it being successful and effective in the class. Well then, is it effective and successful in all 5th grade? And if so, move it to the next level, going to another grade level, and then eventually to other campuses. And this is why it's important for us to do research and gather data to not only benefit our classes, but like in whole communities. Now go to the literature review. I have just 3 of the 5 sources that I found and used as research for my research question. Now this first resource describes how anxiety connected with mathematics is higher now than it has been in previous studies. And there are different methods we can use to support reduced anxiety. And also within this source, the Stroop task was mentioned a bit, and how it can be positively used to help support their anxiety. And it was actually one of the tasks, like I said, mentioned. It says a few different ones within this source. So I was fortunate enough to find one that was both anxiety and include the task. Along with the second one, also explains how the Stroop task helps students in order to memorize certain topics and skills, and that familiarity helps them reduce the anxiety when they encounter those problems in the future or within later the same day. So they become more familiar by being exposed and introduced to these problems more and more, because it helps them memorize. They get familiar, feel more comfortable, so the next time they deal with specific types of math problems, let's say fractions, they will not get, or their anxiety levels will not get as high as it did when we first began, like in the beginning of the school year. And of course, it's a great way to show how their cognitive skills, along with their math skills, will improve by implementing the Stroop task. And then of course the last one, the third one that I have up here, focus more on the Stroop task itself, and how this strategy being implemented can help our students not only become more familiar with fractions and solve more problems related to fractions, but also reduce their anxiety and their nervousness when they do encounter such problems. Of course, I believe this one is also talks about how the Stroop task, can be done different ways, whether flashcards, paper. One idea I thought of on how I would implement it is just using a whiteboard. There's whiteboards in my student's desk. I also always have one at my podium. I can write on the whiteboard, show them, they follow along, write it themselves, and then we go ahead and go through the levels, first starting with round fraction. They tell me the fraction, so on. I put 2 fractions, they name both of them, and then from there they combine the fractions, so they need to add the fractions that are on my whiteboard. And of course, they have their own whiteboard in the desk, so they can actually do it themselves. So they'll pull out their whiteboard, go ahead and follow along, with me. So I think it'll be an effective strategy to help us reduce our nervousness and anxiety, but also be more familiar with concepts such as fractions. Now we go to the evidence-based strategy. And of course, this strategy, like I just mentioned, is of course the Stroop task. Now this would be a simple one to implement, as the materials needed, like I said, are already commonly found in the classroom. Even before I heard of the Stroop task and thought about implementing, I already had the whiteboards, I already had markers and papers, we already done fractions, any of the such that I might need to implement it in the class during my math lessons. So very simple and easy to do, so I would say it's very practical for teachers, and it's not time consuming at all. It could be done very quickly, from 3 to 5 minutes within the class. So whether you do it at the beginning or the end of class, it wouldn't take up much of your lesson, because it's just a quick, simple task. You can even use it as your warm-up, or in a way maybe use it as an exit ticket to determine their level of understanding. So you can use it as your CFU, check their understanding, and then you can kind of use it as an exit ticket and such. But of course, it's very practical, not time consuming, and easy to do within the lesson. Now, with this lesson, for this slide, I wanted to use my cognitive control among primary and middle school students resource by Education Sciences. Now this one really discusses how the Stroop task is great for evaluating cognitive control. And then within this study, in this resource, they did 2 different types of Stroop tasks. So one was a little more complex than the simple. So within the simple and the more complex one, they're looking at the faster reaction times between the two, how much cognitive thinking or load was actually implemented from the student, and how much time was actually needed for each. And then of course from there it would actually determine their level of understanding within the more complex to the more simple Stroop task. But of course, it still uses the Stroop task strategy in order to determine whether or not the students understand the concept, and also understand whether there may be anxiety or nervousness, or their confidence level within the student in general in completing the task. Now of course, this one focuses on both primary and middle school, which is great because my students are very at the end of elementary, primary school, and moving on to middle school. So this is another way to connect the two, from what community common classes and my personal class and experience I'm having this year. So methodology, from here I'm going to discuss my way I will implement or gather the data to implement it into the future. So begin with my baseline data that I collected for my research. First I want to discuss about, or implement a survey about how they might feel about fractions and other strategies that might have helped them in the past. So just beginning, what helped you at the beginning of school when we first introduced fractions, what really helped you understand it at that moment to now, and what might come up with any future effective methods. Now we also look at the work we've done in previous lessons to see where my students stand with their scores, maybe their grades of homeworks, or maybe exit tickets like we can use, and even basic classwork assignments can use to determine their baseline data for each student. And then of course, I would implement a pre-assessment before I begin the first lesson to check what they remember and their level of understanding before we actually get into starting the Stroop task and going back to remembering or reviewing our fractions. which we did right before our state tests. We went back to fractions. The street task would have been a great way to help review. Like we had our math boot camp for about 12 days right before tax or STAR test, sorry. So that was a way that would have been a great way I could implement the street task to help review different concepts, not just the fractions. But then of course within our data, I have my surveys and interviews, which is quantitative and qualitative assessments. I would implement a fraction test towards the end of the last time I would implement our street task. The very last day we would have a test. It would be a summative assessment. Now it would have a pre-assessment, like I said, right before the first lesson to check where they're at. That's both a formative and a diagnostic assessment to see their level of understanding of where they're at the beginning. And then of course I would implement a 1 week mark assessment just after the first week to see how much they would have gained or collected with the first week. Now what would it look like? Like I said, it's an easy way or in short, simple tasks, very practical to implement within your lesson. For me, I would implement the beginning of each math lesson, taking no more than 3 to 5 minutes, right? It can be considered our warm-up or our bell work, as we call it here. We would use the whiteboards. Of course, I would get my whiteboards. We got our expos. I always say, pull out your whiteboards and expo marker. Raise your marker when you're ready to begin. As I scan around and look for ready markers. Great job, great jobs, great job, Karina, great job. And then eventually everyone's ready. All right, go ahead and write the first one. Simple 3 to 5 minute task that would get us reviewing, feeling confident with our fractions, and also helping reducing the anxiety that is caused within math related problems. Now addressing the inequities here, my strategy will support scholars in mathematics as it will reduce any anxiousness or nervousness the students might encounter now or in the future, all the way up to college of course, and as it will be used to help with adding fractions specifically at the beginning. It's easily to adapt and we can change it to subtracting, multiplying, dividing fractions. We can change it to other concepts as well. Now, the impact of this is very beneficial for the students because we just want to help them and support them when it comes to math, any math related problems, because anxiety can be induced by any types of concepts or skills related to math. It's just in this case, I'm focusing more on fractions because I've witnessed it within my class. Fractions actually causing my students anxiety. So it's a great way to connect the both research question and my personal experience within the classroom to actually help my students. So that's one reason I really enjoy doing the research in this project, because it helped me build and work for my schoolwork, but also for my students and my class work here in a sense. So it was a great way to do both. Now, of course, that is the main reason to expose them to the concept daily using the Stroop test, which will cause less anxiety. Students will be more familiar, and their perspective on math would be better as they understand it more. And as a math teacher, I've witnessed students being excited to do certain concepts compared to others because they understood it and they knew how to do it. When a student knows how to do it, they're excited to do it. When they don't, that's when they don't want to. That's when we start getting the no's and refusals and any other issues. So this is a great way to even prevent those type of negative issues within the class. Now we go to systematic change. So the overall experience of math related problems or assignments that make these students anxious is why I want to implement the strategy. I want to change their way the students perceive math and certain topics such as fractions. Now, the experience of math-related problems or assignments, by making them more prepared and more familiar, being more exposed to the concepts that they generally become more anxious to complete. This is not only positively affecting the grades of the scholars, but like I've just stated, their whole perspective of math and these specific concepts when they encounter them in the future. By being able to prove why this strategy will positively support my scholars within my classroom, I could then provide a plan that can support the rest of the 5th grade classes. From there, we move on to the whole campus level, starting from 5th going down to 1st. And then this will allow me to plan for more support for students with anxiety that we can even send out to other Great Heart campuses or other schools within the community who might be struggling or facing similar issues. The whole point and the main reason or objective of this research was to not only help my students now and get them more prepared or ready for math related problems, is to help all students in general, and maybe even others that don't really know how to deal, or other teachers that don't really know how to solve it themselves. Maybe this strategy can also help you and your classroom. So one thing I really hoped to learn was to be able to accurately obtain data from my students on specific subjects that they might be struggling with, such as fractions or anxiety within math, so I can further support their understanding within these concepts and hopefully their overall perspectives, helping improving their confidence and their ability to actually start the problems without focusing on what type of problems they are or getting nervous or anxiety due to these problems. Now, the data I collect should help me create a system using a specific strategy, which is the Stroop task, so where I can support my students and they'll be able to reduce their own anxiety when they come into the future. Maybe they face a new concept. They can remember this to help them with the newer concepts in the future, and they'll be able to do it more independently. So, while teaching math this year, I learned that if there is a question that appears throughout the whole class, then it is most likely a question that appears throughout the whole grade level. Witness times where one student had the question and many others said yes, that's the same question. Then when I go to teach the next class, the same thing happens. Turns out the whole 5th grade had the same question or the same confusion about something. So it's most likely that the whole class has it, the whole 5th grade class has it. So doing something like the Stroop task and the strategies or the research to see if it works on one class will benefit the others as we see, oh, it works, try it in the next one. It doesn't work, let's figure out something else that does work, so then we can take it to the other classes. So yes, it's not only benefiting my class, but it's meant to benefit the entire 5th grade along with the entire school and other grade levels. And then of course, here are my references, the sources that I use to research and get this data. Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure. Thank you for Relay, all the time I've spent this last 2 years. So perfecting my skills and craft as an educator has been amazing. Thank you very much.